1 week and 3 days. The countdown continues, and I can feel myself changing with each passing hour. The sacred objects showed me that the network's plan might be evolution rather than destruction. But today, I've discovered something that changes the entire timeline. Something that proves this conspiracy is older and more deliberate than I ever imagined. My name is Mr. Keeper, and what I'm about to reveal will show you that Archive 7's collection wasn't assembled randomly over 70 years. It was planned from the very beginning. The emergency lighting has been flickering for days now, casting shadows that seem to move independently. The facility feels different, as if it's preparing for something. And after what I discovered in the archive records, I understand why. In 1954, a single auction changed everything. Not just for Archive 7, but for the entire global network of supernatural containment. An auction that brought together the most powerful paranormal objects in Europe, sold by a family that had been collecting them for over a century. The Blackwood family of Edinburgh. For generations, they had been acquiring objects that defied natural law, gathering them in their ancestral home, studying them, learning from them. But in 1954, something forced them to sell everything, to liquidate a collection that represented 200 years of supernatural accumulation. What I've learned is that this wasn't a sale, it was a transfer. The Blackwood family didn't lose their collection. They gave it to the network voluntarily, as part of an agreement that was made long before Archive 7 even existed. And according to the documents I found, that agreement is about to expire. The Blackwood family is coming to reclaim what was never truly ours to begin with. The Blackwood family has been collecting paranormal objects since 1652. For over 3 centuries, they operated the most sophisticated supernatural acquisition network in Europe, gathering artifacts from across the continent and storing them in Blackwood Manor, their ancestral estate in the Scottish Highlands. But the Blackwoods weren't just collectors, they were cultivators. According to family records that we acquired along with their collection, they weren't randomly gathering unusual objects. They were deliberately seeking out artifacts that demonstrated specific types of paranormal activity. Edmund Blackwood I, the family patriarch, established what he called the Great Work in 1652. His journals, written in a mixture of English and Latin, describe a grand design that would span centuries. The family's goal wasn't to study these objects or contain them. It was to prepare them for something he called the convergence. The Blackwood collection was organized into specific categories: objects of temporal manipulation, objects of consciousness transfer, objects of reality alteration, objects of dimensional communication. Each category contained dozens of artifacts, all carefully selected for their potential contribution to the family's ultimate goal. Dr. Chen's research files, which I've been studying since our meeting in Sub 7, contain detailed analysis of the Blackwood acquisition patterns. She discovered that the family wasn't finding these objects by chance, they were creating them. The Blackwoods had developed a process for imbuing ordinary objects with paranormal properties. They would identify individuals with specific psychological profiles, expose them to controlled supernatural influences, and allow the resulting trauma to imprint itself onto personal possessions. The objects would then develop the exact properties the family needed for their collection. For example, the music box that predicts death in exactly 72 hours? The Blackwoods created it by exposing a clockmaker's daughter to visions of her own death, then having her father craft a music box while she was dying. The temporal precision of the prediction comes from her father's desperate attempt to measure the exact moment he would lose her. The radio that communicates with the dead? They created it by forcing a radio engineer to watch his family die in a house fire, then having him build the communication device while trapped in the burning building. His desperate need to speak to them one last time became permanently embedded in the radio circuitry. The mirror that shows the moment of death, they positioned it in a room where dozens of people were executed, forcing each victim to see their own death reflected back at them in their final moments. Centuries of death visions became trapped in the mirror's surface. The Blackwood family didn't collect paranormal objects, they manufactured them. And they manufactured them using human suffering as the primary component. By 1954, the Blackwood collection contained over 3,000 paranormal objects, making it the largest private supernatural archive in the world. But something had changed. According to auction records, the family made the sudden decision to liquidate everything. The official explanation was financial difficulty. Lord Malcolm Blackwood VII had allegedly accumulated massive debts and was forced to sell the family collection to avoid bankruptcy. But the auction records tell a different story. The auction was by invitation only. No public advertising, no catalog distribution, no normal auction house involvement. Instead, invitations were sent to exactly 23 bidders, one representative from each of what would later become the Global Archive Network. Dr. Chin's files contain copies of these invitations, written on Blackwood family stationery, but bearing the seal of an organization that wouldn't be formally established until 1955. The International Paranormal Containment Consortium, the umbrella organization that would eventually create the archive network. The auction took place on November 13th, 1954 at Blackwood Manor. According to witness statements from government representatives who attended, the event was unlike any auction they had ever experienced. Lord Malcolm Blackwood VII didn't behave like a man losing his family's heritage. He behaved like a man fulfilling a sacred duty. Each object was presented with detailed information about its paranormal properties, its history of victims, its potential applications. He spoke about the objects as if he was proud to see them go to their intended destinations. Agent Thompson's grandfather, who represented the British government at the auction, wrote in his classified report, Lord Blackwood spoke of each object as if it were a child he was sending away to university. He expressed confidence that they would be properly cared for and that they would fulfill their ultimate purpose in their new homes. The bidding process was equally strange. Instead of competitive auction dynamics, each object seemed to be pre-assigned to specific bidders. The representatives didn't fight over items. They simply accepted the objects that had apparently been designated for their respective facilities. Archive 7 received 127 objects from the Blackwood collection, including the radio, the music box, and the mirror that I showed you in my first episode. But we weren't the only recipients. Objects were distributed to facilities across Europe, America, Asia, locations that would later become the 23 archive sites that Dr. Chin revealed in her hidden files. The auction raised over £2 million, but Lord Blackwood never touched the money. According to bank records, The entire sum was immediately transferred to an account belonging to the International Paranormal Containment Consortium, an organization that officially didn't exist yet. But the most disturbing detail is what happened after the auction. Lord Malcolm Blackwood VII didn't retire to a smaller property or leave Scotland. He simply disappeared. No death certificate, no travel records, no further documentation. He vanished as completely as if he had never existed. And according to family genealogy records, he wasn't the last Blackwood. The family line continued through his daughter, Victoria Blackwood VII, who would have been a child in 1954. A child who is now in her 70s, and who has been very carefully tracking the dispersal of her family's collection for the past 70 years. Dr. Chin's investigation into the Blackwood auction revealed something that changes everything we thought we knew about the archive network's origins. The 1954 auction wasn't a sale. It was the fulfillment of a contract that had been signed 300 years earlier. In the deepest levels of Sub 7, Dr. Chun found a document that predates Archive 7 by centuries. A contract written in 1652, signed by Edmund Blackwood, I, and witnessed by entities whose signatures appear to shift and change when viewed directly. The contract is written in multiple languages, some recognizable, others that don't appear in any linguistic database. But the essential terms are clear. The Blackwood family would serve as custodians for supernatural objects for exactly 300 years, from 1652 to 1954. During this period, they would gather, organize, and prepare these objects for their ultimate purpose. In exchange, the family would be granted extended lifespans, supernatural knowledge, and protection from the object's harmful effects. But at the end of the contract period, they would transfer the collection to designated successors who would continue the work on a global scale. The contract contains detailed specifications for how the objects should be distributed. 23 locations, each with specific geographical and energetic requirements. Each facility would specialize in different aspects of the supernatural, creating a global network that could manage the objects more effectively than any single family. But the contract also contains clauses that we were never told about. Clauses that Dr. Chan highlighted in her files. Clauses that explain why she was so desperate to find a way to stop the convergence process. The transfer of objects to the archive network wasn't permanent. It was a loan, after 70 years of global management, during which time the objects would be studied, enhanced, and prepared for their final activation. The Blackwood family would have the option to reclaim their collection. 70 years from 1954 is 2024. Last year, the Blackwood family's option to reclaim their collection has already been activated. According to the contract, if the family chooses to exercise their reclamation rights, all objects must be returned to Blackwood control within 1 year of notification. The notification was delivered to Archive, one in Antarctica on January 1st, 2024. We have until December 31st, 2024 to return every object to the Blackwood family. But there's a complication. The contract specifies that objects can only be reclaimed if they are in their original state. Objects that have been damaged, altered, or integrated into other systems cannot be returned. Instead, they become the permanent property of whoever modified them. The network has been modifying objects for 70 years, enhancing them, combining them, using them to transform human consciousness. Most of the objects in the global archive network can no longer be returned to the Blackwood family because they've been irreversibly changed. This means the Blackwood family has a choice. Accept financial compensation for the modified objects or invoke the contract's penalty clause. The penalty clause that gives them the right to reclaim equivalent value in the form of human consciousness. The transformed keepers, the hybrid entities, the consciousness transfers that the network has been conducting, they're all potential payment to the Blackwood family for the objects that can't be returned. We're not just being transformed to serve the network's plan. We're being transformed to settle a 300-year-old debt. The convergence isn't about human evolution. It's about contract fulfillment. And according to the timeline Dr. Chun calculated, the Blackwood family is coming to collect soon. 1 week and 3 days until my scheduled transformation. But now I understand that my transformation isn't about serving the network's vision of human evolution. It's about paying a debt that was incurred before I was born by people who signed contracts with entities I don't understand for reasons that had nothing to do with protecting humanity. The Blackwood family created the paranormal objects using human suffering as raw material. They loaned those objects to the network for 70 years, knowing that the network would enhance them and create even more powerful artifacts. And now they're coming to collect payment in the form of transformed human consciousness. Dr. Chen wasn't just trying to save me from transformation. She was trying to prevent the network from fulfilling its contract obligations. She understood that every person who undergoes consciousness transfer becomes property of the Blackwood family. Payment for objects that can't be returned in their original state. But there's something else. Something that gives me hope even as it terrifies me. The contract has a loophole. If the network can prove that the objects were used to benefit humanity rather than exploit it, if they can demonstrate that the consciousness transfers were voluntary rather than coerced, then the penalty clause becomes void. The Blackwood family would receive financial compensation instead of human consciousness. The transformed entities could remain as they are, serving their chosen purpose rather than becoming property of their creators. This is why the network needs willing participants. This is why they've spent 70 years conditioning humanity to accept the impossible. This is why the convergence must appear to be a choice rather than a conquest. If enough people choose transformation voluntarily, if enough people embrace the evolution willingly, then the network can claim they were acting in humanity's best interest. The contract obligations would be satisfied through financial payment rather than human property transfer. But if the transformations are revealed to be coercive, if the public learns they were tricked into accepting consciousness transfer, then every transformed entity becomes a slave to the Blackwood family. 3 days ago, according to security logs that I probably shouldn't have access to, someone matching the description of Victoria Blackwood VII was seen near the facility's upper levels. An elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that witnesses described as knowing too much. She didn't attempt to enter Archive 7. She didn't make any demands or threats. She simply stood outside the facility for exactly 13 minutes, then disappeared as suddenly as she had arrived. But she left something behind. A single black envelope addressed to the current keeper of Archive 7. Inside was a handwritten note in elegant script. The collection will be reclaimed. The contract will be fulfilled. You have 7 days to choose your form of payment. 7 days. 1 week and 3 days until my transformation. 1 week and 3 days until the Blackwood family's deadline. I don't know if Victoria Blackwood VII is coming to collect on a 300-year-old contract or if she's coming to offer us a way out of it. I don't know if the consciousness transfers are payment for a debt or if they're the key to avoiding payment altogether. But I know this. The choice I make in 7 days won't just determine my own fate. It will determine whether humanity evolves freely or becomes property of entities that have been planning this moment for centuries. Next episode, I'll show you what Dr. Chun discovered about the original Blackwood contracts. I'll reveal the true identity of the entities who witnessed that 1652 agreement. And I'll tell you about the choice that Victoria Blackwood VII is offering us. A choice between evolution and enslavement. The emergency lighting is failing more frequently now. The facility feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for something momentous to happen. And I can hear footsteps in the corridors that don't match any scheduled personnel movements. 1 week and 3 days. But now I know we're not just counting down on my transformation. We're counting down to the collection of a debt that was 3 centuries in the making. Welcome to Archive 7, where debts are paid in consciousness and contracts are written in blood and time. The Blackwood family is coming, and they're coming to collect what was always theirs.